There is so much in the book of Deuteronomy. To select the sermon today, I had plenty of choices, which is not always a good thing for a preacher because sometimes so many choices means no choice. It's hard to settle on a particular subject. But it kind of became clear to me as we were reading through the book, one thing really stood out, and we mentioned this Wednesday night. And so my subject for the sermon today is called Deuteronomy, a book of repetition. That really stood out to me this time. It's a book of repetition. Certain ideas, certain phrases, certain words, certain subjects are repeated over and over and over again. It's kind of like a drum beat. It's kind of like God is saying, you're going to get tired of hearing this, but I'm going to say it one more time. No, I'm going to say it 10 more times. No, I'm going to say it 20 more times. Which tells us a couple of things. Number one, there's great value in repetition as a teaching tool. We think we only need to hear something once. But how many times have you told your child the same instruction throughout their childhood? Dozens and dozens of times. And you're thinking as a parent, I wish I only had to say it once. But I know from experience I have to repeat it many times. But then not only is it a valuable teaching tool, Jesus used repetition a lot to his disciples. But the other thing it shows is our own weakness, that we need repetition. Why don't we get it the first time? And why don't we, when we hear it once, it stays with us? But how often it slips, how often it fades away, and God has to repeat it over and over again. But he says all the way through the book, I'm saying this again and again and again because it's for your good. Maybe the place that shows this idea of repetition the best, although I could have selected many passages, but this one is so familiar, it's maybe the most familiar passage in the book of Deuteronomy, one of the most familiar in the whole Bible, and it is the one passage that religious Jewish people today memorize and repeat, many of them every single day. It's called the Shema. The word Shema just means to hear or to listen or to pay attention. And that is found in chapter 6. I'm going to read verses 4 through 9. And this is kind of like, for Christian people, it's kind of like the model prayer. I started out my prayer today quoting part of the model prayer. Many Christian people memorize the model prayer and repeat it every day. There's nothing wrong with that. It should not be your only type of prayer, but it's a good one to memorize and repeat every day. This is kind of like the Jewish version for them to memorize and to repeat every day. Chapter 6, verse 4. Hear, O Israel, Shema, O Israel. The Lord our God, the Lord is one. This is the primary verse in the whole Bible where we get the idea of monotheism. There's only one true God. The rest of the Bible helps us understand that one true God is broken down into three separate persons: Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. They are not antithetical to each other. They're not opposed to each other. But in our human mind, it's hard to understand. Is there one God? Then why are there three persons? And to understand that completely is to understand the makeup of God, and we don't have that capability, but we believe it. It's like that old saying, I may not apprehend it, I may not comprehend it, but I apprehend it. I grab hold of it and believe it, though I don't claim to understand it completely. The Lord our God, the Lord is one. And here's the first great commandment, the number one commandment of all the commandments in the Bible. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. Your heart being the seat of emotions. We are to feel a love for God. We are to have a closeness. We are to have a bond. We are to have, we say, a heart for God. The idea is just that it's the seat of our deepest emotions, our feelings, is to be of love toward God. But then our soul, the heart is part of the soul, but the other part of the soul is the mind. So our relationship with God is not just about an attachment or a closeness or a feeling. That's a lot of it. But it's also about our thinking, our knowledge, our understanding, our wisdom, the part of the soul that is the mind, that's not the heart. And those two together form the soul, and there's to be a love in both parts. And then your strength, your actions, your deeds, what knowledge you have and what deep feelings you have is to be then worked out through good deeds. There's a reason why God chose those three words: heart, soul, and strength. It means everything about us is to be about loving God. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. And you shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. Such an important thing to live by, and yet every one of us as parents confess and are convicted about how we have not practiced this as parents completely. We may be quick to talk about school, sports, world events, activities around the house, all sorts of subjects that we fill our time talking about, but not enough time talking about the Lord and His Word. There was a time when the Bible was the number one textbook to teach children how to read, how to memorize, how to write, how to live out their life. Every home had a Bible, and it was often opened in the evening to read to the family. There's probably a lot of homes that still have a Bible, but it's tucked away somewhere. It has dust on it. It has remained unopened for a long time. But for verse 7 to be practiced means there's a lot of repetition, isn't there? Repeating the same things over and over and over again. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand. They shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. The word Shema, that means to hear or to listen, but it's much deeper than that. It carries the idea that you're listening with the intention of practicing, of obeying, of living. So it's not listening for the purpose of memorizing or just understanding but an anxiousness to hear it so that you can practice it. It's like to be just a natural process. We often hear the Word of God, but then we resist it, don't we? And this word Shema in the book of Deuteronomy is used 75 times. Can you believe that? 75 times. I prefer the Old King James translation of the word Shema. It's translated here 30 times, but it's translated hearken. I love that word hearken. To me, hear is a passive idea. I can hear but not do anything about it. But hearken carries the idea further. I'm hearing and practicing. I'm hearkening. I'm doing something about it. Hearken carries the idea, I'm paying attention because I want to pay attention so I can figure out how to put it into practice. Paying attention. God hearkens us, doesn't He? The Bible uses language like He bends down low. He hearkens to hear our prayers. He opens His ears. He's like sitting there anxious to hear from us. And He's basically saying here, I just want the same thing back from you. Some of the language about God to us, those of us hard of hearing, we find ourselves, especially in a group setting, kind of leaning in. We've read that this morning. Leaning in with our, so you can hear what that, but that's the impression I get of God. He's constantly like leaning in to hear what we have to say to Him. And He's wanting to hear it, and He's wanting to act upon it. And He's hoping that we have that same kind of attitude. I told you I read a psalm every morning besides our daily readings, and it's just by coincidence. I read this morning's psalm was Psalm 81, and to me it shows this idea of I'm trying to get across of this Shema of God toward us and us toward Him, better than any other passage in the Bible. I want to read just a few of those verses in Psalm 81. Because it's words of anguish, despair from God about what He's looking for from us. Psalm 81. In verse 11, verse 10, because the book of Deuteronomy can be summed up by a single phrase in Psalm 81:10. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Open your mouth wide, and I will fill it. I think that is an accurate description of the book of Deuteronomy. God is saying all the way through, in essence, I want to bless you people. I want to hear you. I want you to hear me. I want your future to be great. Open your mouth wide, and I will fill it. But my people would not heed my voice. Israel would have none of me, so I gave them over to their own stubborn heart to walk in their own counsel. And here's the cry of anguish. Oh, that my people would listen to me. How many times have you said that as a parent? How many times has God said that about us? I'm really only asking one thing. Just listen to me. Open your heart. Open your ears. Goes on to talk about what He would have done for them, how much He would have blessed them. If they'd only done one thing, paid attention to Him. I said that here in chapter 6 and verse 5 that one great commandment talked about the word heart being the seat of emotions. The word heart, this tells you something about this book. The word heart is used 46 times. We really look the wrong way of what the Torah, the law, was intended to be. We really look at it as a set of strict regulations. God says, no, I'm speaking to your heart. I'm speaking to something much deeper than just do this and don't do that. The word heart is used 46 times. One particular verse I want to read is in 4:26 or 4:29. But from there you will seek the Lord your God, and you will find him if you seek him with all your heart and with all your soul. And then another text I want to read for this sermon, and then the rest of the sermon won't be as long as the dealing with the two texts, is in chapter 30 and verse 15 through 20. Chapter 30, verse 15 through 20. See, I have set before you today life and good, death and evil. That's kind of another way of saying the two trees in the Garden of Eden. One is life and good, and the other is death and evil. Choose which one you're going to partake of. In that I command you today to love the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, to keep his commandments, his statutes, and his judgments, that you may live. I want you to notice through this passage how often the word life and live, the word heart, the word life, the word live. This book, Deuteronomy, is a book about life, not death. It's a book about the heart. That you may live and multiply, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land which you go to possess. But if your heart turns away, isn't that true? You know when your heart turns away from the Lord, don't you? You know when a friend or a mate or a child. It's probably one of the saddest things that can happen to you in life is someone that you love dearly, when you get this sense that their heart has turned away from you. It's a terrible thing, isn't it? And I see a lot of marriages like that, where you can just tell the way they interact with each other. They don't have a heart for each other. It's just not there. Life is too short for that to be the case. And God knows it instantly when our heart turns away from him. So that you do not hear. That's what happens when your heart turns away. You're not interested in what that person says to you anymore. You're not interested in what God says to you anymore because your heart has turned away and are drawn away and worship other gods and serve them. I announce to you today that you shall surely perish. You shall not prolong your days in the land which you cross over the Jordan to go in and possess. I call heaven and earth as witnesses today against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. But what does God want? Therefore, choose life. God tries to bend the odds in your favor, that both you and your descendants may live, that you may love the Lord your God, and that you may obey his voice, and that you may cling to him. I like that word, cling. That means it's very difficult to someone to uncling you. You know, you hold it on tight, you wrap your arms around it, and someone's trying to pull your arms away from that person. No, I'm clinging to them. and you're not going to separate me. For he is your life and the length of your days, that you may dwell in the land which the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give them. God is a God of life and life-giving. So, we've already read a few of them. The phrasing or the words of the first great commandment, love the Lord with all your heart, soul, and strength, is quoted about 7 times. And it's probably the key to the whole book, because it's the key to the whole Bible, because Jesus said it was. He said it's the first great commandment. In chapter 12, he talks about the place of acceptable service. And I've encouraged people through the years, as you're reading through that chapter, to underline or circle the word place. But you also have to underline or circle the word there, because it's really the same thing. He uses the word the place, not to any place you choose, but to the place I choose. And then a lot of times in that chapter he uses the word there to talk about the place. It's repeated over and over and over again in that chapter. And he's telling them it's the place of my choosing, not the place of your choosing. And I think Jesus may have had Deuteronomy 12 in mind when he said, I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I have a place, and it's the place of my choosing. It's my church. And it's the place where I want you to serve me as a child of God. Did you notice as you read through the book, the word here is used, as I said, a lot. What did I say? 75 times total, Shema. And the word fear is used a lot separately throughout the book. But he puts the two together. I counted at least, at least 7 times, probably more than that. Probably missed some. Hear and fear. He puts them together. I want you to hear and fear. Maybe the best place to show that is in chapter 31 here, 31 verses 12 and 13. He says, gather the people together, men and women and little ones, and the stranger who is within your gates, that you may hear and that they may learn to fear the Lord your God, and carefully observe all the words of this law, and that their children who have not known it may hear and learn to fear the Lord your God as long as you live in the land which you cross the Jordan to possess. The word remember is used 13 times, and the word forget, as in do not forget, which is the same as remember, is used 9 times in that way. So 22 times total. 22 times scattered throughout this book. Remember and do not forget. Okay, Lord. Remember and do not forget. Okay, Lord, I said I won't. But you will. So I'm going to keep saying it. Remember, don't forget. And you old married folks like us, we use that phrase quite a bit to each other now. You know, I'll be going off to the gym or something. I'll say, I'm going to stop by the store on the way home. What do you need? And she'll tell me, like, maybe 1 or 2 items. I think, that's easy to remember. And then as I'm going out the door, she says, don't forget. And then sometimes she'll even send me a text so that I can remember. Because a couple hours later, I might forget. Back in chapter 4 is one good place he says this. Chapter 4 in verse 9. 4 and 9. Only take heed to yourself and diligently keep yourself, lest you forget the things that your eyes have seen, lest they depart from your heart all the days of your life, and teach them to your children and your grandchildren. And then in the chapter we read, chapter 6, down further in verse 12, beware lest you forget the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. When James wrote his book in chapter 1 and verse 25, he says about the word, the perfect law of liberty, the word of God. He says, don't be a forgetful hearer. You think, well, if I heard it, I'm not going to forget it. Yeah, we do. Do not be a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the word. Put it into practice. Because Peter warns us in 2 Peter 1:9, when he's going down talking about adding to your faith, this, that, and the other thing. And then he says, those who do not continually add to their faith and remember these things can become spiritually blind. And he says, even to the point they forget they were purged from their old sins. Have you ever gotten to the point, or maybe you've gotten cold in your heart toward God, and you start wondering, was I even really saved? Peter warns us to don't let yourself get to that point, but we do. I want to close with, we talked about this Wednesday night, and I'll read a passage here, then I'm going to go over to the book of Hebrews and read a few verses. The word today and this day. And I looked it up. Sometimes it says today and sometimes it says this day. And the Old King James uses this day mostly. And the newer translations mostly use the word today. But you put both of them together because they're exactly the same Hebrew word. They just decided to translate it two different ways for some reason. And I counted over 50 times. Over 50 times. God says today, 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 today. And Jolene and I had a discussion about this in one of our morning readings because, he uses language like, today you enter into covenant with me. You think, didn't they enter into covenant 40 or 38 years earlier at Mount Sinai? Or he says, today I call you as my people. What? Weren't they his people yesterday? But it's a device that God uses to teach us today, every day of your life. That today you renew that idea that He is my God and I am His people. That I have entered into a covenant with Him daily. That's one of the great keys to the Christian life. Is if we don't renew ourselves daily through prayer and Bible reading and meditation, reconnecting is a good way to say it. To reconnect with the Lord every day, we start slipping. And the book of Hebrews uses language at the beginning of chapter 2 that these things can slip. And the idea in the Greek language there, it's like a boat tied up to the dock. But if that rope becomes untied for a few minutes, the boat still remains right where it was. You don't see it moving at all. But slowly, over the course of time, 30 minutes later, that boat's a little ways out there. But you hardly notice the drift because it's pretty slow. And that's often what happens. If we don't maintain daily, we start drifting. And we think, well, okay, I'm not really that close to the Lord, but I think I'm okay. And that kind of attitude can just cause the drift to continue. So he uses the word today, each and every day. I want you to think about these things. So in chapter 29 of Deuteronomy, and I'm going to read verses 9 through 15. 29, 9 through 15. All of you stand today before the Lord your God, your leaders and your tribes and your elders and your officers, all the men of Israel, your little ones and your wives, also the stranger who is in your camp, from the one who cuts your wood to the one who draws your water, that you may enter into covenant with the Lord your God and into his oath, which the Lord your God makes with you today, because he makes it with us every day. He commits himself to us every day. He wants us to commit ourselves to him every day. That he may establish you today as a people for himself, and that he may be God to you, just as he has spoken to you, and just as he has sworn to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I make this covenant, this oath, not with you alone, but with him who stands here with us today before the Lord our God, as well as with him who is not here with us today. But when he is with you, it'll be today for him. He's just not in it yet. So now turn to Hebrews chapter 3, and the Hebrew writer picks up. Again, I'm thinking he may have just read through Deuteronomy when he wrote Hebrews 3, because he grabs hold of this idea of today and each and every day. And he says, he's quoting from the Old Testament, from Psalm 95 in this particular place. Hebrews 3:7, therefore, as the Holy Spirit says, today, if you will hear his voice. He's just bringing the Shema of Deuteronomy directly over to these Hebrew Christians of the New Testament. And he says, today, hear his voice. Okay, what about tomorrow? Okay, tomorrow it's going to be today. Hear his voice. Every day you're renewing that, trying to get the hearing of your heart open up to him. And of course, prayer is one of the main ways to do that. And then down in 3:15, we become partakers in verse 14 of Christ, if we hold fast the beginning of our confidence steadfast to the end, while it is said today, if you will hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion. Part of the purpose of hearing his voice every day is so that we don't harden our hearts. Then in chapter 4 and verse 7, again, he designates a certain day, saying in David, today, after such a long time, as it has been said, today, if you will hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. I think that's why God instructed Paul to write 2 Corinthians 6, verse 1 and 2. Behold, today is the day of salvation. Now is the acceptable time. He's saying that each and every day is a good day for salvation. It doesn't have to be a particular day. It doesn't have to be at camp or in a church service. It can be in the privacy of your home. Some of you were saved in your homes. Some of you were saved in church services, some at camp. The day and the occasion is not what's important. The important part is it's the day of salvation every day that can be experienced, that can be received. And I hope today would be a day of salvation here. We're going to have a verse of invitation song.